Dan, we know cold calls are a core part of the sales process, but they're often untrained, they're unenthusiastic, and maybe they're just seen as a necessary evil for a lot of sales reps. From your experience, where is the staffing industry falling short as it relates to cold outreach?
Yeah, great question. I think we seem to be still stuck in this mentality like it's the 1980s, and the expectation of just banging out calls and getting 10 meetings a week is something that you can accomplish. It's just not realistic in this day and age, and it's not in alignment with how buyers want to be engaged with salespeople. And so I think as an industry, we just haven't evolved with the times and how buyers want to be engaged. So I think that's a big part of it. And then another part of it, of course, this will sound a little biased, but in my experience working with lots of staffing firms, very few have an individual or individuals in their company that can actually model what a good cold call looks like. And so as a result, salespeople struggle with it.
Why is that? Why have other industries evolved, but we haven't?
That's a great question. I wish I had the answer for that. I actually spend a lot of time following what sales leaders, revenue leaders are doing in the SaaS industry, the software industry, other industries. I always say they're like the varsity team and we're the JV. We're still stuck in applying sales practices again that we were doing, when I got into the industry in the mid 90s, and we just, for one reason or another, we just haven't evolved. Now, of course, that's not the case with every company out there, but by and large with the industry. And, that's actually what motivated me to get into, one of the things I should say that motivated me to get into the training business.
And then on the other side of that, you had mentioned that internally, we don't have a lot of teams who have somebody who is a good cold outreach caller. That was articulated very poorly, but we don't have a sales rep who can emulate what the ideal cold call should look like. Why is that?
Yeah, there's not many. I think what happens is the owner or the founder of the business, they have a network. He or she has a network. They're able to cultivate that network. They then often hand accounts off to the sales reps that they hire, and then they build and do a great job with managing and building that book of business. But if you look at, and I don't have the exact statistics off the top of my head, but I think it's like 80% of staffing companies never get above 10 million. And then if you go and you look at that 80%, they're getting 80 or 90% of their revenue from one or two key customers. And so they can't figure out how to scale revenue growth because they don't know how to teach salespeople, not just cold calling, but other aspects of sales prospecting as well. And, so it's a real bugaboo.
Yeah. Is a byproduct of that too, that we've been order takers for so long that we haven't really had to sell?
I think that's a huge part of it. I think especially right now, certainly with the clients I'm working with a lot of salespeople. This is the first time they've ever seen a difficult market. We've had it good for a long time. And so now you start to really figure out who can sell and who's just sort of a relationship.
So how do we start to flip that logic? If we can accept the fact that as an industry, we're a little bit behind in our cold calling process, how do we start to take the steps forward to change that?
Well, I think you gotta, there's a few things. So certainly there's training, plenty of books out there. There's articles and so forth that you can read out on the web. But another thing is, listen to your calls, record your calls, pay close attention to what's working and what's not working. I'm a big believer in doing A/B testing, which, the marketers do with emails, and you can be doing, and you should be doing the same thing with cold calling. So listening to what's happening on your calls, figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And then I'm old school. I'm such a big believer in role play practice every single day. Most people don't want to put in the time or the effort to do it for a variety of different reasons, but it works. Bottom line, it works.
How do you propose people do that? I am in the camp of I don't really like it either. But I've also, I guess, had enough calls at this point where I feel pretty confident on the phone, right? I have 5 to 7 calls a day. At this point, I think I've heard a lot of challenges. I've heard a lot of resistance. I haven't heard it all. I'll be the first to admit that. I've never been fully confident and comfortable with role play, role practice. What do you say to the team who's thinking about rolling that out but doesn't know where to get started?
Yeah. Well, I think, so this to me comes back to your mindset, and this is all psychological. So for me, I actually never wanted to get into sales. I was scared to death of getting into it. And even when I got into it, I had to like convince myself that when I was making cold calls, I wasn't trying to sell per se. And fortunately, I ended up working for a company that gave me a script and some ideas to do it in kind of a clever way. But if you're going into a cold call and you're trying to convince your team to make cold calls to get meetings, that's kind of intimidating because it's hard to book meetings. So instead, like what I'm teaching when I'm working with salespeople, the first thing you got to be thinking about what your mental model needs to be is you're just trying to start a conversation. And so it's no different than if you're trying to start a conversation with someone at a restaurant, a bar, a networking event, or over a cold call. And so step one is you got to set your expectation that the goal is to disarm the person. So if you go into the call and your goal is to start a conversation, you're going to focus on disarming them. What I find that does for me and people as the salesperson, it takes down the pressure and the anxiety level. And oh, by the way, the one person that hates making cold calls more than the salesperson is usually the buyer. So if you focus on disarming the buyer, then that also relieves the buyer of anxiety and pressure of being on the receiving end.
Yeah, I had Rochelle Carrington on the show a little while ago, and she went through this methodology of you're not going to get a yes close on the first call, rarely ever. So stop treating the cold call, stop treating a sales call like you are. But instead, think about what yes does look like. What do you want the prospect or person on the other end of that phone to say yes to? Are you trying to get a second appointment? Heck, are you just trying to get them to talk to you for more than 5 seconds so that you can at least talk to the person? What is yes in terms of this conversation? And then work towards that yes so that you can inch closer to closing. I thought it was a phenomenal framework and a phenomenal way to point it out.
I think she's, spot on. I mean, completely agree. And I think what I was saying at the beginning, we still are stuck in this mentality that we've got to book 10 meetings a week. And so we're pushing for an outcome. We're pushing our personal agenda. And instead of bringing the customer closer to us, we're actually creating distance. We're making it more difficult. And so then when I call that customer back the second time a week later, eventually they remember me from last week and they're going to put up their guard and they're going to be even more difficult for me to bring around to get a meeting. So it's just focus on disarming and making them comfortable speaking with you. The other irony with all this is, I've been in the business since the mid-90s, is we complain that we're treated like a commodity vendor or a transactional vendor. The way that we behave on cold calls is one of the reasons why we get that reputation. You're not going to close, to your point, you're not going to close a deal in a cold call.
Yeah. I want to unpack that a little bit. So yes, we are seen as a commodity. Is that because when we approach the cold call, we're all calling with the same message? Are we calling with the same proverbial script? Why do you think clients are seeing the industry as a commodity from the very beginning?
Yeah, I think they're all calling with the same pitch. And I think most reps they've all been either taught or told, or it's ingrained in their mind, you have to control the prospect. You have to control the narrative. And people don't want to be controlled. That's not how people buy. That's not how people want to be engaged by salespeople. And so now you're running into cognitive bias, right? So once they have a few bad calls from sales reps with an experience like that, they're just going to assume you're like everyone else. And so the sirens start going off. You're triggering their mental spam filter, if you will. And so,
ooh, good way to put it.
One of the things, I'm always telling reps, like, just do the opposite of what your competition's doing. And that by definition will help you differentiate yourself.
The mental spam filter was a good way to articulate what the cold call is sort of becoming and trying to disarm the person on the other end of that call. How do we disarm somebody on the other end of that call? So if I'm new to the industry, I'm new to sales, and my boss is tasking me with 10 cold calls a day, right? Let's make it a super easy number. To the person listening right now saying, yeah, that's me. How might I start to disarm the person on the other end of that call so that I can at least warm up the opportunity to have a conversation?
Yeah. So first thing is you obviously have to come prepared. So you have to do your research. Everyone knows that. Very few people do it. So that's step one. We can get more into that. But the way that we really disarm is we ask for permission. Brad, hey, I know you weren't expecting my call right now. Would it be okay if I took a quick minute to explain to you why I'm calling? And then you can decide if it even makes sense for us to continue. Does that sound fair? So you have to make the prospect feel like he or she is in control. Because if you don't do that, then they're going to feel like they're stuck in a bad conversation. And who wants to be stuck in a bad conversation?
It's interesting. It almost flips the methodology of where I think a lot of us start is I want to say as much as I can, as fast as possible. And I want to let my upstate New York, my Buffalo, New York come out a little bit and talk as quickly as possible because I know you're going to hang up on me, Dan. So I want you to know as much about me, my company, what it is that we do before you click a button, right? And I like the thought of disarming on the other side of that and saying, listen, I know you're busy. I know you weren't expecting my call, but is it fair if I just have 15 seconds of your time, 20 seconds of your time to tell you why I'm calling in the first place?
That's exactly right. Your mindset, your mental model is, look, Brad, I'll just be real upfront. If at any point you think this is not a good use of your time, please let me know. You can kick me to the curb. No harm done. I'll get out of your hair. But you got to believe it. It can't just be words. You have to believe it. And so when you believe it, that comes through in your tonality. It works really, really well. But most salespeople are so desperate to get a meeting and get in front of a customer or get a dialogue going that they shortcut the process. And that's where I think that's where they misfire.
Hey, it's Brad taking a short break to tell you about my friends over at Tricom. What if your back office fueled your growth instead of holding it back? Tricom makes it happen. From payroll and billing to accounting and asset-based lending, Tricom clears the roadblocks, empowers your path forward. Your team gets paid, your cash flow stays steady, and your business scales like never before. Tricom doesn't just support you, they set you up to soar. To learn more about my friends over at Tricom, visit tricom.com. That's TRICOM.com. All right, let's get back to the show. Yeah, I've been saying that on a few shows lately. In marketing terms, we talk about the ADA model. So it's awareness, interest, desire, and action, right? So before you buy anything, whether it's staffing services, a new t-shirt, a new microphone, whatever it might be, you need awareness of the product. I have to captivate your interest into buying the product. Eventually, you'll have a desire where, yes, I'm thinking about that. And then finally, you take action. Our industry, because we're down, we have been for years, because we can't get somebody on the phone, because we can't close new orders, we're constantly looking for action. And as a result of that, our prospects and our clients are running for the hills scared because they know it's coming. They know it's going to be on that call. So Dan, I love what you're saying in terms of we need to disarm them and differentiate ourselves from the sales process. We can't differentiate on service delivery if we can't first differentiate the sales call, differentiate the sales process. They're never going to get to service delivery.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, no, you're spot on. And it's really just buying into that, convincing yourself that you're not there to make a sale. Look, it's going to take 5 or 6 conversations. You look at the statistics. So you're just there to start a conversation. And for me, like when I'm coaching reps, I'm encouraging them. We're just trying to have a meaningful conversation. So what's a meaningful conversation? Well, that's getting 1 or 2 or 3 key pieces of information that's not available in the public domain, right? So you might find out about a key project, a key initiative, maybe something about the customer's team. And so if you think about that, in order to get that information, obviously I have to ask good questions, but I'm going to have to disarm the customer and make the customer feel comfortable in opening up and sharing that information with me. So that's why I think disarming it's absolutely critical. If you don't disarm on the first, in your cold calls, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, I have been saying for a while now, it takes 17 to 20 touches for a prospect to fundamentally know our company exists, right? So that's a mix of calls, email, social media, whatever it might be, 17 to 20. Brad Smith from our team just reported back in a weekly meeting this past week with all of our strategists that he had heard at the marketing roundtable this past month or week with the Vices Group that it takes 40 touches for someone to fundamentally know your company exists. And I think the challenge there is if sales reps are coming in and thinking they're going to one call close anybody when other organizations are reporting 40 touches, let's even say it's 17 to 20, let's cut that in half. To your point, Dan, it's not going to happen. So we need to know what yes looks like on the other end of that call because it's not going to be a close 99.99% of the time.
That's right. Dan, well, I think a yes, I think what a yes looks like is the goal is you're trying to get them to engage. You're starting a conversation, and where I think a lot of salespeople go wrong, and perhaps this ties into the study that you just referenced, they're going into a broadcast pitch and they're trying to talk about their company and their service offerings, which is not the right way. Where you want to take the conversation is you want to be talking about the problems that you're solving for other like-minded customers. Customers aren't sitting around thinking, boy, I sure could use a staffing company, or boy, I sure could use a marketing expert with SBO and inbound marketing experience. What they want are results. They want outcomes. So back to the research, you have to know the persona that you're calling on, and then you talk about the KPIs that you're impacting for those like-minded customers. That's how that, in combination with disarming, is how you're going to get them to, to talk and engage in a conversation.
Yeah. And it's so true. We know that outside of staffing and recruiting, right? We know that we buy a certain product because of how it's going to make us feel or how it's going to make us perform. I've said on this show multiple times, I'm training for the Buffalo Marathon right now. I know the type of shoes I want to wear because of coaches who have pitched other shoes to me, right? I know the training program that I'm following because of coaches who before me have ran sub whatever marathons, and I'm following that program. I'm following that system. I have their case study and their case story as proof that this works. But in staffing and recruiting, instead of coming forward with the case story, as I like to say, instead of a case study, because I think a story is better in our case, we don't do that. We come in and we try to sell services without pitching the impact of the services. If we led with data so that individuals could see themselves in the shoes of the hero of this story, we'd have much higher likelihood of closing.
Yes. I've been preaching for years. I have a whole training course on this in my program. We talk about how to build an impactful value proposition. And it's nothing, it's not a novel idea. It's you go out, you interview your candidates or your consultants who are out on billing, and you interview the customer or the hiring manager they're working for, and you simply find out what's the problem that they're solving, what's the solution that they're implementing, and how is it impacting your business? How is it increasing revenue or reducing cost or helping you get a product to market quicker? But for one reason or another, very few staffing firms can do that. And that's the key component. That's, to me, that, like, if you want to get more meetings and accelerate your sales cycle, to your point, you need more stories. And it's those stories. And I believe every staffing company out there, they're making quantifiable impact on their customers' business, but they just don't know how to go out and build those stories.
Do you think they don't know how to build the story, or they're just moving so quickly that it's, I put Dan to work, on to the next one. I put Dan to work, on to the next one.
Great question. I think there's some that's just from personal experience that I know that struggle with conducting the interviews, but you're probably right. The majority are just, they're so reactive, and taking the time and making that a priority to do that, right? I mean, as probably as well, better than I do. Most staffing firms don't have a formal marketing department to help with something like that. But it's key. The customers want to hear stories. They want to see social proof.
I couldn't agree more, Dan. And I'm sitting on the thought of tell more stories. And you might have gave me the sound clip that I've been looking for the show. Definitely the YouTube thumbnail copy I've been looking for the show. And when we think about telling more stories, that's what differentiates us, right? If we are a commoditized industry as a stereotype, right? We all put great people to work and great opportunities. We all, at the end of the day, do pretty much the same thing, right? We put great people to work in a great opportunity. Now, yes, how you do that changes. You have differentiators, you have value propositions. Yes, I'll be the first to accept that. But if we are a commoditized industry and we're seen that way by our clients, the stories are what sets us apart. The stories are what makes us unique, and the stories are what makes us believable when we finally do get somebody on the phone to talk about how we're different. I always think it's so interesting that we as an industry, a buyer of staffing services could have a negative connotation with staffing and recruiting because of one bad experience, right? One bad sales rep could ruin the entire opportunity to ever work with that client. And there's really no other industry in my mind like that, right? If you go out tonight, Dan, and you have a bad steak, it doesn't mean you're never going to have steak again. If you have a bad trip and the hotel you stay at isn't great, it doesn't mean you're never going to travel again. You might not stay with Hilton or whatever it is, but you're still going to travel. In our industry, though, one bad sales rep could very much make it impossible to penetrate into a new company forever. And it's so interesting to me that that could be the case.
Yeah, it's I mean, you hit on a lot of great stuff there, but bringing it back to the story, that can't be replicated. Your stories are unique. And, yeah, so it's interesting. I did an exercise, with a customer not too long ago. We were talking about this exact topic and we need to have more stories. So I said, well, let's take a look at a roster of all your consultants who are out, billing right now with your clients. So we started going through the roster. You got Java developers, data engineers, QA analysts, et cetera. And I would ask the manager and the sales rep, all right, well, what's this consultant here? It looks like they're a Java developer at a financial services company. What are they building? What's the problem that they're solving? And they didn't know. I was like, so that's a problem. Okay, so we got to figure it out. Our job is to go out and interview the consultant and the client so that we do understand it, so that then when you're making sales calls, you have a story to tell, and that's going to differentiate you.
Hey, it's Brad taking a short break to tell you about an offer exclusive to listeners of Take the Stage. 30 minutes of strategic marketing consultation with me, completely free. Hey, whether you're looking to drive more sales or more job applications, I want to help. Visit bit.ly/stage offer. Pick a time that works best for you. That's it. Again, whether you want to drive more applications or more job orders, I want to help. That's bit.ly/stage offer. All right, let's get back to the show.
All right, Dan, I've disarmed the prospect. I'm making my call. I've disarmed the prospect. I'm now talking to them. Where do I go from there in terms of changing the entire landscape of the cold call?
Yeah. So I think you want to share with them how you're making an impact for other like-minded buyers. So if I'm calling on a leader of data management, I might talk about how we're making an impact with data governance, adoption of dashboards, compliance, reporting compliance, the things that are going to be really near and dear to the heart of that person. And then it's a simple question, does any of this resonate with you? Are these a priority for you? And so we're trying to find out, because at the end of the day, what we ultimately have to, in order to make a sale, we got to figure out what their number one priority is. Needs go unfulfilled every day. So I don't care about a need. I need to know what their number one priority is. And then I want to find out why that's a priority. And so the way that you get somebody to open up and start talking about their priorities is you have to demonstrate that you actually have some knowledge in that area. So one other thing to kind of wrap in there, fold in there, another thing that we teach is wrapping your expertise around your questions. So I can't just say, hey, Brad, what's keeping you up at night? But what I could say is, hey, Brad, I'm working with other data leaders like yourself. We're finding that the biggest challenge they're struggling with is setting up their metadata repository and getting their ETL tools integrated. What are you finding most challenging? And so now you send the message to the customer, you understand their world, you get their pain, you can be empathetic, and they're going to be far more inclined to engage. And you're starting the conversation much further down the path than if you were to come in and say, hey, do you have any needs? Or, what's keeping you up at night?
I think that's where a niche staffing firm or a niche recruiter really has an upper hand, because you can talk that language, you can speak with that vocabulary. If you're sort of a one-size-fit-all staffing solution, you're just not going to have that vocabulary in your dialogue, right? You might be able to, I could research Dan ahead of the conversation and I could use ChatGPT to say, okay, Dan does this type of work. What words should I use on the call? And maybe I get a couple buzzwords that I put on a sticky note under my computer monitor, right? I guess we could kind of try to fake it, but you're not going to be able to hold that dialogue and hold that conversation as well as if you are specialized in a very specific niche and a very specific vertical.
Yeah. And so it's a great point. And this is why I think it's so important that you got to understand the core problem that you solve for your customer. If you don't understand the core problems that you solve for your customer, you're going to go into pitch mode. So if I work for a staffing company and we sell 8 different staffing verticals and we sell it to the head of HR, I probably don't want to talk about how we can make an impact for individually in finance or marketing or what have you. It's going to be more of a holistic pitch and a problem that we solve for the director or vice president of HR managing a large team of employees. I remember I worked for Oracle years ago and I was selling their core database and their app server. And I couldn't believe there's so much functionality packaged into these products. It was overwhelming. And so I started meeting with a solution engineer who would explain to me and help me better understand this stuff so I could have better conversations. And he's the one that taught me the concept. He said, let's forget about the features and functionality of the product. Let's just talk about what problem each component solves. And it totally changed my whole perspective. So now you're because again, customers aren't sitting around thinking about solutions. They're thinking about the problems they have. And so that resonates with them.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, it's just a shift in mindset.
That's Apple 101, right? When the iPod came out, wasn't it 1,000 songs in your pocket?
Yes.
Right. So it was, yes, the technology behind the scenes, you could sell the tech behind the scenes, but no one's going to care. I don't want to carry 200 CDs anymore. My dad actually used to have this whole binder of CDs. And I can still picture it to this day. He'd want to listen to a certain CD and he'd flip because it was all alphabetized. He'd find the M's, right? Find the one he wanted, put it in. And when the iPod came out, he was super reluctant. Whole side story that I don't need to be telling right now. Super reluctant to the iPod because he always loved his CDs, right? But that is marketing 101 in terms of messaging 101, exactly like you're saying, Dan, is they didn't sell based on the technology that went into an iPod. They sold it on, listen, put 1,000 songs in your pocket. And wherever you go, you can bring those 1,000 songs with you in your pocket.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. So, so we're hitting some really good stuff here. And, so you start to combine all this and it's all sort of compounds and you can see how a cold call can go downhill pretty quick. So there's skills that are involved. There's knowledge that's involved. You've got to do the preparation. But the good news is anybody can learn it. It's not, that's the other thing that, that's just mind boggling to me is, I've worked with lots of salespeople that have been in the industry 10 plus years, but you hear them make a cold call and it sounds like it's the first cold call they've ever made. Even if your approach isn't the best, pick up an approach and stick with it and then just work on refining it over time.
Right. It's just like singing a song, right? If you're in a band, you practice and you rehearse that song thousands of times, right? There are bands that won't play certain songs because they've played them for 20 years, right? You practice it. You know exactly how to do it. You know the cadence. You know how you're going to sing that specific line. You go through it so much that you could do it in your sleep. And I think what's interesting, Dan, and sort of the underlying theme that you've shared quite a bit here now is we're kind of just picking up the phone and calling people. And we're hoping for the best. We're hoping that it's going to be our lucky day. And unfortunately, it's not, right? I had Tom Erb on the show a while ago, and he had mentioned that we're in an era of informational buying. And gone are the days of lucky days, right? You're not going to call somebody and they're going to say, you know what, today's your lucky day. Sure, I could use a staffing vendor. So you need to have your script down. You need to have your cold call down. And I think a lot of what you're hitting on today is valuable resources and valuable information for everyone listening.
Yeah, no, well, thanks. I appreciate that. One other thought, the other skill that you need to develop is what I call flipping. So look, when you make a cold call, obviously cold calling is inherently disrupting somebody's day. It's an unplanned interruption. So even if you're amazing at it, they're going to most likely tell you, bad time, not interested, send me information. These are little blow-ups. They're just designed to get you off the phone. So flipping the conversation simply means you acknowledge what they just said, but then you come back and flip it with a question. And you say "Hello, Brad. So, hey, I can appreciate that. And I know that you're busy, to make sure that the information I share with you is impactful. What exactly are you looking for?" And so the point of that is the person that's asking the questions is the person that's controlling the conversation. Right. And just like earlier, we were talking about disarming, you're asking for their permission to make them feel empowered and they're in control. But the reality is the salesperson's still in control because they're the one that's steering the conversation with the question.
Dan, I got one more question for you before I let you go and get you to our rapid fire round. How important is the voicemail of a cold call? So I know my own behaviors, right? I never answer a call that I don't know. I just don't.
Yeah.
I haven't I can't even tell you how long, especially now with telemarketers using a local area code. I know what's going on. I just don't answer a call, right? It's plain and simple.
Yeah.
How important is it to have that script down perfectly? Because we know maybe people aren't going to answer their phone call.
Yeah. So you need to nail it. It's a tough one. You know, we're talking 20, 30 seconds max, and that's hard to squeeze in a lot of information. But to your point, so many people don't even listen to their voicemail for the reasons that you just mentioned. So now a lot of it's, as you know, it's email. And so email's a whole nother conversation with email frameworks. And, that's a whole nother science. So, but yeah, you've got to have that, name and phone number. And it's just brand awareness. That's what the voicemail is today.
It's Dan Fisher, founder of Menemsha Group. Dan, before I let you go and get you to our rapid fire round, I want to give you the floor to share a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Sure. So Menemsha Group, we provide sales enablement and recruiter enablement services. So what, a lot of times people say enablement. What does that mean? Well, if you think about everything that a sales organization or a recruiting organization needs to be successful, there's training, there's coaching, there's content. There's enablement content. So that would be both customer and candidate facing content, as well as internal content like playbooks and scripts and battle cards. And so we create all of that and then we deploy it through a sales enablement platform. We also have some really cool AI tools, for coaching sales reps and recruiters. So, sales and recruiter enablement, been doing it 16 years now, worked with about 500 different staffing companies across the country. So that's my passion. That's what I love doing.
Do you want to land more clients and close more deals in 2025? Haley Marketing is offering big savings to help staffing firms like yours grow. Get $1,000 off targeted marketing campaigns, free tools to track your hottest leads, and no setup fees on services that help your company get found online. Plus, we'll even help you stay in touch with prospects for free. But you need to act fast. These deals end June 30th. You visit bit.ly/Bialy offer to find out more information. Again, that's bit.ly/Bialy offer for more information. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, Dan, let's get you to the rapid fire round if you got a second.
Cool.
One book that has fundamentally changed your life.
Think Like Your Customer. I read it. It's a sales book that a lot of people don't know about. It came out maybe the mid 90s, late 90s. Fantastic book. Highly recommend it.
And one piece of advice that you would give to somebody just starting in staffing and recruiting. I'm actually going to flip that question just for you specifically. Let's say they're just starting in sales in staffing and recruiting.
Yes. Patience. Have patience. Don't let the highs get you too high. Don't let the lows get you too low. This business is a roller coaster. Sales in general is a roller coaster. So that would be my advice.
Dan Fisher, founder of Menemsha Group. Dan, can't thank you enough for coming on Take the Stage and sharing your insights with us, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Brad.